everybody, and welcome to another Diablo 3 video. If you want to skip from one section to the next, go ahead and check out the description below. It'll be the first thing you see. We have greater rifts, gear, legendary gems, skills, Kanai's cube passives. We are done. And as for the video, it's all about the leap quick. Ugh. So about the build, first and foremost, you want to know how the damage works, which is damage over time. Yes, this is a dot build. It's kind of like playing a warlock in World of Warcraft where you would ping somebody with an affliction, you would keep your distance, and eventually they would die somewhere off in the distance. Additionally, we will be utilizing the full 6-piece Might of the Earth set so that every time we leap we cause an earthquake as well as generate fury, and we will also be utilizing a Kanai's cube passive that allows us to leap 3 times instead of just once. And so the way the build works is we're going to leap 3 times in a row to generate fury and cause 3 earthquakes. Then we're going to go ahead and use a secondary ability. They give you 2 options, Ancient Spear with Boulder Toss and Seismic Slam with Rumble. I don't know why they give you 2 because there's really only one viable option, which is going to be Seismic Slam with Rumble because it works on 2 levels. We have gear that every time we use the ability it increases the damage of Earthquake, which is where the vast majority of your damage comes from. And secondly, it acts as a catalyst that the more fury you consume, it will further reduce the cooldown of leap, putting you in a position where you could potentially leap forever and thus fill the screen with earthquakes, which is great because it lasts 8 seconds, can stack massive weapon damage, and it takes up 18 yards, which is pretty cool. But I don't want to mislead you guys, and I don't want to crush your hearts either. However, for real, when you compare the full 6-piece Might of the Earth set to some of the other sets for the Barbarian, like Waste, Raykor, Savage, Kings, Raykor being at the top as far as damage output goes in my opinion, I'm going to have to put Quake at the bottom of the barrel, but don't let that be a buzzkill for a couple of reasons. One is because just because I think it's at the bottom of the barrel doesn't mean it's too far from competing with the other sets. All Blizzard has to do is just make a few tweaks. I do have some suggestions, but 2, it's just an opinion. We all have one. There's a lot to look forward to. For example, the 6-piece bonus, 20,000 damage to Seismic Slam, 20,000 damage to Ancient Spear, 20,000 damage to Earthquake, 20,000 damage to Avalanche. The 4-piece bonus, every time we leap, we do an Earthquake. Not to mention, using one of our passives, every time we use Threatening Shout, we increase the damage the enemy takes, while simultaneously causing an Earthquake and Avalanche, and every time we use Warcry, we increase our defense, again simultaneously causing Earthquake and Avalanche. We could still augment our gear to further our damage to melt and crush the enemy. So again, a lot of fun to be had. But when you compare it to the other sets, I just didn't find it to be as optimal, and when doing Greater Rift 115, I just felt as though it was underwhelming, especially for all the effort that went into it. And so, conclusively, if Leapquake continues to underperform when compared to the other Barbarian sets, I would suggest turning Might of the Earth into a speed build so that you can use it to farm other Barbarian set pieces at lower tiers. Now, it is worth noting that we are in Season 28, we have a lot of damage and defense boosts, so I don't mean lower tiers as in 60, 70, 80, I'm talking about 100 or 105 at least. Go ahead and replace your main hand with the Ingeome, which will reduce your cooldowns by 10 seconds every time you kill an elite pack, and the Echoing Fury from ability. Go ahead and put the Blade of Tribes in the Kanai's cube passive. You should do pretty good. And as far as the suggestions go, I really only have 4 creative ideas that I feel would make the Might of the Earth set more competitive with some of the other Barbarian sets. Number 1, reduce the enemy's resistance to stun locks and control impairing effects. And I know this works for every set, don't get me wrong, but it's not fair to treat the other sets like Might of the Earth because they're not. Where you have burst damage with Raykor and Savage, you actually have damage over time with Leapquake using Might of the Earth. The reason that I feel it's very unfair is because while we're waiting for the enemy to die, they quickly become immune, and then our Bane of the Trap legendary gem just completely disappears and we lose over 50% damage. So we're waiting for them to die, and then we have to wait even longer, and I just don't think that's fair. Number 2, when you read the full 6-piece Might of the Earth set, there's a lot of cool stuff, a lot of cool abilities going on, but the sad reality is not all the abilities fit on the action bar. So let's, for example, talk about Avalanche because that didn't make the cut, the damage was too low. Give us a rune for Avalanche. I would love that. I don't even care which one. Preferably Snowcap Mountain, but I'll take anything I can get. Number 3, when you are climbing higher tiers with the full 6-piece Might of the Earth set, you're going to quickly discover that your survivability is almost completely tethered to the Band of Might ring. I get that it's a stable. I talked about it in another video. It does 80% damage reduction over the course of 8 seconds. You leap all the time, so it's basically going to be up all the time. But once you slot Band of Might in, you can't use Convention of Elements. When you look at Might of the Earth compared to the other sets, you see an elemental set. So it's really unfortunate because they belong together that you couldn't use them together at the higher tiers. So Blizzard could totally add the perks of Convention of Elements ring to the set, then only cycle through the elements that we're using. For example, Seismic Slam is physical, Earthquake is fire. If they give us the Snowcap Mountain with Avalanche, we got cold. That could be really unique. That sounds like it would really compete with the other sets. And finally, number 4 of my creative ideas, and in my opinion, the most convenient and time-saving solution to have Might of the Earth set compete with some of the other Barbarian sets, is to take Bane of the Stricken Legendary Gem, which is a damage amplifier. Then we're going to go ahead and take Might of the Earth set specifically, not any other set, just Might of the Earth. We're going to add a damage multiplier so that every time we use Bane of the Stricken Legendary Gem, we go ahead and multiply that damage times 3, 4, 5, and maybe even 10. That's it for suggestions. Let's go ahead and hit up those greater rifts. And as far as the gear goes, right, you guessed it, we're rocking the full 6-piece Might of the Earth set. I bet you're getting tired of hearing me say that. I know I am. So we're going to start things off with the gloves, the shoulders, the helmet, the chest plate, the pants, and the boots. As far as the belt goes, we decided to go with Girdle of Giants. We did this for 2 reasons. One is for the secondary stat, which is 12 to maximum fury, because whenever we use Seismic Slam and expend all of our fury, the more fury we consume, the further cooldown reduction we're going to have on Leap. And for the ability, Seismic Slam increases the damage of Earthquake by 250%. It does range between 200 and 250%. I got lucky with a Primal. As far as the wrist guards go, we decided to go with Ancient Parthan Defenders. The thing is, if we're not in Wrath of the Berserk form all the time or as much as possible, where are we going to get our defense? The best alternative we have is Ancient Parthan Defenders with the ability, each stunned enemy within 25 yards reduces the damage taken by 12%. To give you an idea of the range, we have an ability called Threatening Shout that also has 25-yard range. So I'm going to go ahead and use the ability so you get an idea of the parameters. Boom, that actually takes up a lot of the space, right? As far as the jewelry goes, we decided to go with Bastions of Will, which is comprised of 2 rings, very powerful for burst damage, focus, and restraint. Let's go ahead and check that out. We got focus on the left, and we have restraint on the right. Every time you hit an enemy with a resource generating or resource expending ability, you will go ahead and get an additional 50% damage, so that when you use them in tandem, you get 100% burst damage. It's kind of laughable because the burst damage is actually damage over time, so we'll get there when we get there. As far as the amulet goes, we decided to go with Squirt's necklace. As long as we don't take damage, our damage is increased 100% because we want as much as possible. We want to squeeze out as much damage as possible in the shortest amount of time is what I'm really trying to say. And as far as the weapon goes, we decided to go with the Blade of Tribes. Beautiful for the playstyle, but unfortunately we had to reroll it like 4 or 5 times because they kept giving us 10% resource reduction. Useless, man. Anyway, I am happy with what I ended up with, and we did this for 2 reasons, the secondary stat and the ability. As far as the stat goes, the 24 to maximum fury, as you know, when we use our secondary ability, Seismic Slam, it will expend or consume all fury, so the more we have, it will further reduce the cooldown of Leap. Additionally, we have the ability, War Cry and Threatening Shout cause an Avalanche and Earthquake. Avalanche and Earthquake both deal 800% increased damage. Note, it's 800% increased damage, not weapon damage. Weapon damage is trash, I don't care what people say. That does conclude the gear. Let's go ahead and discuss what we have in the inventory. As far as what we have in the inventory, I really wanted to give you an idea of all the gear that we ended up rotating through to push the numbers as far as we could when it came to climbing higher tier, greater risk. And with what we're wearing and what we're going through right now, this is honestly the best that I could come up with, keeping our survivability up there. Now, we are going to briefly touch on this without becoming too involved. Again, just want to let you know, I probably ran over 100 greater rifts, not because I want to, but because there were so many options available to me, but this was the most successful. Anyway, let's go ahead and take a look. We have on the left, Geom. I crafted this myself. Obviously, you can tell by the background of the image. Next to it, we have Echoing Fury, we have Messerschmitt Reaver, Azure Wrath, Heart Slaughter. Now for the rings, we have Band of Might, then we have the Stone of Jordan, we have Royal Ring of Grandeur, we have Convention of Elements, 2 Hellfire Amulets, we have the Obsidian Ring. This one I had a lot of hope for because when you read the ability, reduce the remaining cooldown of one of your skills by 1 second when you hit with a resource spinning ability. I thought it was funny. I got ahead of myself because I was like, oh my gosh. Well, when you look over here at Earthquake, it says that it costs 25 fury. So naturally, because it costs 25 fury, you'd think every time it ticks, it's going to reduce the cooldown so we can keep Wrath of the Berserker up. The answer is no. It doesn't do a damn thing. Anyway, we're going to go ahead and move on. Next to that, we have another belt. It's the Dread Iron, so that we could take advantage of Avalanche. It just doesn't do enough damage, so we ended up casting that aside. Under that, we have the Witching Hour. On the far left, we have the Lut Socks. Next to it, we have Tyrael's Might because of the secondary stat, 20% damage to demons. And next to that, we have Mordek's Brace. But again, because we couldn't keep Wrath of the Berserker up all the time, we decided to go with the Ancient Parthan Defenders. And as for those legendary gems, we actually use more than what you see in the inventory here. Starting at the top left, we have Bane of the Trap. Next to that, we have Molten Wildebeest Gizzard. Under that, we have Zai's Stone of Vengeance. On the left, we have Esoteric Alteration. Under that, we have Gogok of Swiftness. And to the right of that, we have Bane of the Stricken. Like I said, I did my best. Let's go ahead and knock out those legendary gems. And as far as those legendary gems go, number 1, we decided to go with Bane of the Trapped, increasing damage against enemies under the effects of control and pairing effects by over 50%, which is pretty substantial. Obviously, I don't need to tell you that. There's a good chance you're already using it in your build. Additionally, gain an aura that reduces the movement speed of enemies within 15 yards by 30%. It is worth noting that every time we leap, because that's what we're going to do for the build all the time, that at the point of impact, we're going to reduce the movement speed of enemies by 60% for 3 seconds. We also have the Death from Above room, 100% guarantee to stun lock the enemy. So this is going to get a lot of play. The only issue I see is that the enemies become immune too quickly and then your damage is going to plummet, but we're going to see how far we can take it. Number 2, we decided to go with Molten Wildebeest Gizzard. This is because we're using the Squirt's necklace. As long as we don't get hurt, we deal 100% increased damage. Aside from that, number 3, we decided to go with Bane of the Stricken to amplify our damage. Hopefully, over time, we can do something substantial, or at the very least, take down the Rift Guardian a little bit quicker. That concludes the legendary gems. Let's go ahead and move on over to the skills. And as for the skills go, beginning with the left click, we have Earthquake with Molten Fury. That's because Earthquake is where the vast majority of our damage comes from, and the Molten Fury rune allows us to top out at 6,000 weapon damage as fire. For the next ability on the right click, we have Seismic Slam with Rumble. As you know, as a catalyst, as long as we consume or expend all Fury, it will reduce the cooldown of Leap. For the next ability, we decided to go with Threatening Shout and Falter. Now, I understand that many Diablo players are not very fond of damage over time builds, and personally, I feel the same, which is why we went with Threatening Shout and Falter, so that the enemies take 25% increased damage over the course of 6 seconds, and we can melt and crush the enemies as quickly as possible. For the next ability, we have Leap with the Death from Above rune. Leap because that's all we really do with the build. Death from Above to stun lock the enemy for up to 3 seconds, activating our legendary gems like Bane of the Trapped, increasing our damage over 50%. This also acts as a support skill because we're using Squirt's necklace that as long as we can prevent damage taken, our damage may be increased up to a potential of 100%. For the next ability, we have Warcry with the Veteran's Warning. This works in 2 ways. 1 is survivability. 2, this also is a support skill to help support the Squirt's necklace to prevent damage taken by dodging and evading. For the next ability, we have Wrath of the Berserker with Insanity. This is for Rift Guardians and Elite packs. And as for the 4 remaining passive abilities at the bottom, beginning on the far left, in the first slot, we have Ruthless. You deal 40% additional damage to enemies below 30% health. This is where you start to see the enemies melt. I love it. For the second slot, we decided to go with Rampage, increasing strength by up to 25% as long as you kill enemies in less than 8 seconds. I wouldn't recommend it at the higher tiers because you just can't kill them quick enough with a damage over time build. I would consider swapping it out with Brawler, that as long as you're surrounded by 3 enemies within 12 yards, you get flat 20% damage. Aside from that, at the lower tiers, farming other barbarian set pieces, you should do fine. For the third slot, we decided to go with Earthen Might. Gain 30 Fury when Avalanche or Earthquake is triggered. As you know, we're using the Blade of Tribes. Every time we use Threatening Shout or Warcry, it doesn't matter which one, we're going to cause an Avalanche and Earthquake simultaneously, and thus generating 60 plus Fury. For example, at the bottom right, as you can see, we have 0 Fury. Let's go ahead and use Threatening Shout. Boom, 74. And for the fourth and final slot, we decided to go with Boonable Kathos to reduce the cooldown to Wrath of Berserker so that we can knock out the Rift Guardians Elite packs a little bit quicker, but aside from that, it also reduces the cooldown of Earthquake. This does conclude the skills. Let's go ahead and knock out the Kanai's Cube passives. And finally, here we are with Kanai's Cube passives. Beginning on the far left weapon slot, we have the Furnace, increasing damage against elites by 50%. Remember, elite also implies bosses and goblins, so have fun and go wild. As far as the armor slot goes, we decided to go with the Lutsock so that we can leap 3 times in a row instead of just once, because every time we leap, we generate Fury. The more Fury we can generate and use our secondary ability, Seismic Slam, to expend or consume all Fury generated, it will further reduce the cooldown of leap. I know it's long-winded, bear with me, we're almost through it. And for the third and final jewelry slot, the heart-wrenching, soul-crushing chink in the armor, we decided to go with the Band of Might ring for survivability. After casting Furious Charge, Ground Stop, or Leap, take 80% reduced damage for 8 seconds. Remember, the context of the video is greater rift pushing, not lower tier farming. Otherwise, I'd be happy to use Convention of Elements. Because what you'll realize when you're greater rift pushing at the higher tiers like 125, 130 plus, if you use the Band of Might ring, you can take the hits for the most part, but you're waiting forever for the enemies to die. Subsequently, you wait so long that the enemies are no longer impaired or affected by your stun locks, so you're actually going to lose 50+% damage from Bane of the Trapped. Meanwhile, if we use Convention of the Elements, you're able to do damage, but you're not able to take the hits. Even if we swap the Squirt's necklace out for a Hellfire Amulet with the Brawler passive to increase damage and reduce damage taken with the Esoteric Legendary Gem, you simply won't survive. So you are heavily tethered to the Band of Might ring. That's what we decided to go with. So that concludes the Kanai's Cube passives. If you are curious about what my mercenary is wearing, don't worry about it. I might not put it in the feed, but I will put it at the bottom of the description below the video. All you gotta do is scroll down. Aside from that, as always, thank you so much for spending time and hanging out with me. You know, I appreciate it. Making these videos is a lot of fun. I wish I had more time to do it, but it is what it is when you're in your 30s. Anyway, if you want to see more content like this, please like and sub, and I will catch you in the next one. Peace.